Good afternoon. It is about 1:30 on a Thursday afternoon, and I know things have slowed down a little bit as far as my communicating with you, and it is what it is. It's just been a semester from you know what, and doing the best I can to keep you folks in the loop. Again, I thank you for your cooperation, especially you, Pamela. You've been terrific about being my conscience. I don't appreciate it. I really do. For example, I realized that I hadn't published the postings I put up for, I think, 2 weeks, and because I always forget to do that on Canvas, and I fixed that thanks to Pamela's chiding, and I appreciate that a lot. So everyone should know that everything that should be published up to this moment has been published for you to take a look at. I don't think this will be particularly a very long video for some of the obvious reasons. Next week is the last week. Today is, I think, the 27th, and the course technically ends actually on the week of the 8th, if I'm not mistaken. But that's if we were giving final exams. I am construing, I think validly so, that the action plan that you've done uh, amounts to being the final exam. So we will not have a class, nor will I be contacting you this way, at least, with as far as that's concerned. So technically, in my mind, next week, the 3rd is, so I think if you want as a Tuesday class, although you're not, you're a 7-day a week class, we'll be done. So essentially what I'm saying is, this is the last video I'm going to be doing, and it will, it's intended to be the second video really from a couple of days ago. Maybe that was Sunday. I forget exactly when. Days are tumbling together for me, and I'm talking too much. So this will be the last video. I know I said that 3 times, and I won't say it anymore. Now, a couple of housekeeping things, but really important housekeeping things. And they are that the action plan and a paragraph accompanying it, I never can say that word, accompanying it, is due around the 5th. Now, by around, that means, again, in my head, the 5th is the last day of class, but it is not technically. So I'll take your action plan into the following week. Just don't want to wait all that long, because I like to get my grades in a proper amount of time for your sake and for the sake of the school. So I'll take it into the following week. I just don't hope you don't particularly stretch it out for that long. Now, if you're working on your plan and suddenly you have something that's holding you up, heaven forbid, then you let me know. Now, if you go past, I was at the end of the following week, I'll probably call you or email you and say, "Where's your paper?" And depending on what you tell me, I'll probably offer you an incomplete. I don't like to give incompletes for lots of reasons. But I'll give you an incomplete, and then you'll have a couple of months to come back to me with the assignment properly corrected. That's the way it's going to have to be, because for the things I said to you before. Now, I also will do, and it just makes sense if you think about it. You turn in your action plan, and I see problems. I don't really expect to see problems, because not a lot of people have asked me for help. So I'm assuming that everybody knows what they need to do to make this a good paper. But if I see something where I think you need some, my word, remediation, I'll let you know. I mean, I'm not interested in giving people less than an A. And so if you're going to get less than an A on an assignment, I'll let you know. You're not going to get an A unless you fix this, this, and this. And if you want the opportunity to get the A, then you'll complete it in a timely way. And if you're satisfied with getting less than an A, which I doubt, knowing how I read most of you, then you'll accept that as well. But in other words, I'm going to grade it. I'm going to, I think it's not even A's, it's whatever the point system is. I never remember it. I'll use my point system, which equates to an A, to pull everything together. And you have an opportunity to fix that if you need to have the opportunity to fix it. And I know I said this about 10,000 times. If you need help, today is, I said, the 27th, just let me know. I will make the time. I will make the time. I will make the time. If you make the time, I will make the time to communicate with each other, to take you over the threshold. Those of you who needed some help in the last couple of weeks can testify to the fact that we had some really productive, interesting conversations. And the folks whom I spoke with did really understood what I was trying to have you do. And I'd made some adjustments too, for that matter. So I'm available for extra help. I'll let it go with that. You have my phone number. You have emails, obviously, and we'll FaceTime. We'll tom it. We'll do anything we need to help you get this through. So enough said with that. Now I want to remind you too, and this is sort of something I brought up last week, but you may not have seen in the video. However, last week's email, a couple of days back email, informs you about what I'm reminding you about right now. You're going to give me a chart, and the chart's going to have all these little boxes filled in. And by the way, just not to confuse you, but to perhaps help you, if you don't think the boxes are big enough, and sometimes I don't think they are when I'm completing one of these plans, then write it in a narrative. Take each of the columns and write it in a narrative, and I'll figure that out. You don't have to do that, but I'm saying you could do that if you think that it would be more flexible for you to approach it. But the bottom line is you're turning in a template. You're turning in a completed template of all those columns and rows, which indicates to me whether you've mastered the ideas of change theory and of implementing your own idea about solving a problem in your area. I also asked, this is the also part, I also asked that you give me a paragraph. I don't want 10,000 paragraphs. I want a good, solid, professional paragraph commenting on what thinking you invested, how you brought this plan together, and what you think the highlights are, what you still wonder about. Just show me some introspection. Okay, so that should be an addendum. So it's a template plus a paragraph. I'll leave it at that. Okay, I'll probably say that one more time before the video is over, but enough said about that. There's also our last discussion question. And as you might imagine, the discussion question is based on today's video and on the video I posted 3 or 4 days ago. Again, I don't remember the exact date. And that video will, and this video, are about what I happen to think is a synthesis of a lot of the other things we've spoken about before. We've talked about Lewin. We've looked at Fulham very extensively. Looked at Dr. Coze's points of view about change, and we also looked at the Dufour, if I remember right, McRell, and a little bit of Cynic, and there's several others out there we could have gone into, but I didn't want to overwhelm you with all these things, because sometimes they just kind of get stuck in the funnel and nothing comes out at the bottom of the funnel if you push them through too fast. Anyway, so now the last theory with a T, small t, is mine. And my theory, I call futuring. Sometimes I use the phrase futures-based change leadership. And I introduced it last week. And rather than push you through the whole premise altogether all at once, I decided to break it in chunks. I also gave you a PowerPoint, very long, very lengthy PowerPoint that doesn't altogether isn't altogether necessary for you to internalize. And you'll notice that as I go through last week's video and as I go through it today, I'll skip over some things because I don't want to turn you inside out on this. If you're really interested in this, he smiled. I have a pretty good book out about it, a simulation that's coming out, I think in the fall, that you would want to see, actually. I promise you that. All right. So the book is called Futures-Based Change Leadership. And there's another one book, actually, that's its companion. It's called Futuring is Planning, Planning is Futuring, which also sort of extends the ideas in the first book. Again, and no pressure. I didn't require it in the class. And but if you're looking to pad your professional library, especially as you become actual principals and building chairs or directors, I promise you they'll be of great value to you. So without me yammering on too much, here's my last time. If you need to talk to me, I'm standing by. I'm standing by the phone. I'm waiting to be called, emailed, contacted if you need help. Okay? Or you have a doubt, you can just email me. I'm not going to say any more. Now let's share the screen and I'll pick this up. I'll step back a bit and then I'll pick it up. Understand a couple of things. First thing is that it's a very long slide presentation. You were not the audience. The audience was Chinese administrators from Shanghai, and that was an interesting presentation that they did a couple of years ago. And this is very comprehensive, but also goes down trails that you don't have to worry about. And I'm not going to belabor the slides that we've already gone on to, except maybe for this one, because I think this is important. In the end, you need to really figure out what you think about what future means to you. So it's a very slippery word. It means different things to different people, different things to different cultures. And when the cultures aren't lined up and believing what it's about, it causes clashes that sometimes can be very sticky, not only in schools, but in politics and lots of other places. You future all the time. When you decided which kind of shoes to wear today, you were futuring. If you decide to put on a little sweater today because it's kind of chilly, or put on a jacket because it looks like it's going to rain, you were futuring. Squirrels future. They bury their acorns. Farmers future. When they turn their land over again and try to refresh it, reinforce it with nutrients, so it will continue to give crops to people. Every time you vote, you are futuring. You're using the values you have to decide the candidate whom you think will give you will more nearly assure you of the values that you believe in. Good, bad, or indifferent. That's futuring. Futuring is really just forecasting ahead for probables. And so you need to understand, what you need to really pin that down for yourself. To understand how you view future. And I told you I viewed it as an ocean, and I continue to do that. But sometimes I think I don't ever think it's random, but I do sometimes think it's more nearly a river than an ocean, but that's another conversation. And I'm not going to point all this out. This emerging future premise is a great one. And I'll just kind of march down through some of these things. I reminded you that when it comes to the future, there are three kinds of people. Now, you as leaders should recognize which one you should get your arms around. When it comes to the future, there are three kinds of people: those who let it happen. And there are a lot of teachers who are passive like that. Teachers. Heaven forbid a leader of any sort, or a principal in our case, lets things happen. That isn't good. All right. There are those who make it happen. That's us. Well, that's what should be us. And those who wonder what happened, those are the dumbfounded ones who didn't, read the tea leaves, so to speak, to know how that relates. I don't think I used these terms with you last week, but I'll just drop them on you for a minute. Once you know what futures are out in front of you, then you have two choices. I'm exaggerating this, but two choices. And one is you can adapt to the future you think happening, or you can transform away from it or to it. So, for example, if you knew it was going to rain today, you adapted to it, putting on a raincoat or wearing a hat or whatever it is, or bringing an umbrella. You were adapting to the future you saw. Minor piece, but something you did that enabled you to make it through the day. If you're transformative, that's a different story. Now we're talking about changing your DNA. Now we're talking about changing your dispositions and the group you're leading, especially when it comes to the E&L population you're talking about. Think about it. We're going to keep. I have to pause. I'm sorry. Richie, give me a second. I'm sorry. I have a friend in the hospital, and he called me, and I may have to break this up again. Okay, where was I? Let me share again. We're talking about adaptation versus transformation. We really want to radically change what you do to get what you need because of the preferred future you would rather have than the future that you think you're going to have. I'm on a diet. My preferred future is to lose a whole lot of weight. I could adapt to that, pretend that I'm dieting and maybe lose a few pounds. That's adapting. Transformation is really getting into the premise. This is what you need to do to transform your weight. It's an example of transformation. But when it comes to changing the school system, well, I think I started to say this a minute ago, when we're talking about people's attitudes, about working with the children, people's skill set to work with these children, how systems come together or do not come together to help you work with those children. That's all about transformation. Keep that in the back of your little minds. All right, so this I'm going to skip through because we don't need to do that. I have said this a few times before. We have met the future and the emerging future, I should say, and it's us. Collectively, the sum of us, the SUM of us, comprise our collective future. Think about that one for a minute. Put that under your pillow. And we talked about the fact that really it's about capacity of the culture to change and to sustain change as it comes along. One of my bosses way back used to call a lot of innovations, old wine in new bottles. Think about that for a minute. There's some truth to that. And then he would go on to say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, which was to say that he felt, yeah, this change might be necessary, but you want to do this, it's going to cost you a lot of time and energy and brains. And if you're willing to invest it, well, do it, but you may wind up in a bad place on it if you don't do it correctly. But it is about capacity, he shouted. Capacity. Does your faculty, your colleagues, those of you said you get pushback from the general ed teachers whom you work with and who you will lead someday, conceivably, when you get pushback against them, some of it's about their senses of self-efficacy. They don't feel like they know how to teach these children. Sometimes that's very correct. And in order for them to, here comes a big word, to be self-efficacious, feel like they have the confidence to do that, they need to learn how to do that, which comes back to professional development. Or, this was the capital O, or palm it off, which is to say, give it to you or to your department to take care of it. There's a cowardice in that sometimes that troubles me. It's the same for special education children and teachers who teach special education kids in a gen ed classroom, who throw their hands up in the air and say, I can't work with this kid. Where's the special ed teacher? Let's refer them. Sometimes I think that's just an excuse for not having to work hard. All right, so just pushing through some of this, so I won't overwhelm you. We'll make you think about this, things we already talked about in the previous video. I know I said this last time too, and that would be in other words, your organization's capacity, cultural capacity to change is dependent on the extent to which it can create itself, recreate itself with collaborative purpose, and can future. That is to say, forecast the probables, reject the probables that they don't want to happen, and work with the probables they know must happen, or that they think they don't want, or we need to work harder to get rid of. Again, capacity to change. Learning about systems. We talked about this last week. Another piece of this is creativity. How many times have we been in a group where someone offers an idea that's sort of out of left field, and the person either metaphorically or actually gets thrown out of the meeting because they said something that was so out of left field and so odd that no one was willing to give it a crack at looking at it more carefully. Happens way more than we think it should happen, and that's when you stifle creativity, then you just keep doing what you did, even though it may not have worked. And Einstein called that the definition of insanity. So design thinking is the fancy word for it. And the only premise I'm going to bring here is for the moment is that energy does in fact follow direction, which is to say that when you're drawing your attention to X, you may not be paying attention to all the rest of the letters in the alphabet. And not paying attention to the whole with a W leads to problems. So the good leader always is sure, or it takes responsibility for assuring ourselves that we know where the attention is, where the focus is, and that's where the energy needs to go. Because people who recognize their old habits and try to get rid of them are the kinds of people that you want to help the kids that you serve. Now, Edgar Schein, we spoke about Schein early on, and when we talked about culture, he's another change theorist in my view. Although he's more about structure of organizations, but he's talking about change in terms of the culture's ability, beliefs, and attitudes about whether they can change or whether they want it to change. And presencing is a verb you probably have never heard before, or not often, which is, as Schein puts it, the ability to rise to the occasion. Get so focused in and connected to. I was watching a hockey game the other night, and I'm much of a hockey fan. I'm trying to learn it, and you can see that they were presence. They knew where that puck was going, and they knew where the puck was going to be before you even got the person, even whatever they call the forward, even got into the corner to dig it out. And so what we're talking about here is shifting the place from which the organization currently operates to someplace higher. And the rhetorical question is, has that happened to you? Or have you been in a group where a group suddenly goes, whoa, I see what I need to do here. We need to do. And we need to do this instead of something we've been doing from forever. So there's a lot of power to this presencing premise. And I can recommend some books for that. And I want to read you this. This is a great chart, though. Culture with and without design thinking. It tells you what they will look like, and I'm not going to beat it at you now. So we got systems thinking, and we have design thinking, and we have another one, and that's called collaborative, CLP. You see that here? And don't forget that there's a Venn diagram here where these things overlap. And collaborative leadership is about something people talk about but don't necessarily do so well, especially in schools. Everybody's got master's degrees. Plus, everybody thinks, I will tell you, you may not know this, that something like 5% of the whole world, only 5% of the whole world have master's degrees. People who get master's degrees do pretty well in school and probably pretty smart. And the problem with that is that they think that the only people who are smart. And so when all the smart people are in one room, they're too busy doing playing with what I call I thinks, and they don't listen to each other and they don't dialogue. When a group finally says, wait a minute, can we hear what everyone's talking about? Let's hear what that creative idea off in the corner might be for us. Let's examine it from a objective, dispassionate, thoughtful, reflective way. And it's amazing what will fall out of the tree when that is permitted to happen. So these 3 points: systems, health, creative health, and collaborative leadership practices, health, come together and they form, instead of 3 fingers, they come back into a fist to overdo the metaphor to be powerful as capacity. And read that more carefully. There's some pretty good material there. The same premise: what would the culture look like with or without that practice? But really, we're saying again that the organization's capacity to change is still dependent on, well, first of all, it can't continue without those premises. It just can't. It may be there, but it won't be continuing in the sense of it being effective. You're not going to tear down PS 138 if that's where you work. It's not going to fall apart into little millions of bricks. But in essence, it doesn't exist. So you can't meet the society's needs if you as leader aren't making sure that those things are all intertwined and healthy. But in any way you look at it, they still are in the need to do what we're talking about here. And that is to say, in the end, the school's capacity to anticipate the need for and the ability to sustain meaningful long-term change is dependent on the school's ability to future. That is to say, forecast. That is to say, to routinely look for what's possible, probable, and preferable. Now, some of this we've already talked about, so I'm not going to beat this to death. I think I showed you this chart several weeks back, but let me show it to you again. It's a very simple description, linear, left to right, chart of how people make decisions. And I'm really talking about it quickly here. It begins with facts and information, data, goes to goals. They lead to choices. The choices lead to futuring. Well, I'll come back to that for a minute. Let's skip over to this side. The choices are always tempered. Okay. The choices we're talking about are always tempered, intertwined with, not sure that's the right verb, values and feelings. And so it's a terrible example, but here it comes. When 9/11 happened, the horror of 9/11, the anger, the grief that continues to this day are facts. And at that point, the goal was to make sure it never happened again. And the choices that we began to think about back, if you remember that long, some of you are pretty young, was to do nothing, to let it happen again, or do something, whatever something might mean, or to do certain specific things. And that time, 2011, George Bush decided to invade Iraq and also decided to crack down on terrorists around the world. People argued about whether invading Iraq meant anything, and historians will let us know. I have an opinion about it, but it matters not at this point. That was 22 years ago. But in essence, we had goals, and the goals were and the decision we made at the time, the futuring part, was based on our values. A lot of people wanted revenge. If they didn't want revenge, they certainly wanted to be assured that this wasn't going to happen again. That was everybody's value. It's pretty much still the same value, thankfully, today. So when I apply my futuring skills here, when I forecast things with some good skills we can learn, then we come to value. We have to really decide which comes through the values filter. So if you're talking about the values of your school, and if the values of your school is kind of weak when it comes to the premise of how assuring that every child can learn, maybe some people are going to say, well, we don't see the need to really turn ourselves inside out to help ENL kids or special education kids for that matter. Being kind of cynical, I know, but I want you to stand back and see those dynamics as you see it in your own experiences. And so we talk about futuring. There are three kinds of futuring. I'm not going to press you on this so specifically, but I will tell you there's three kinds. One is kind of low level, but absolutely necessary. If you think about it, it goes back to the decision model. And that begins with futuring. What's my place? I'm sorry, information gathering and problem finding. You get all the information you can, all the data about the children you had. I know you're giving nicer slats right now, or did the past couple of days. You're gathering data about these babies to make decisions about, or to draw conclusions about what issues there are. If you go back to your own planning templates that you're putting together, I haven't seen a planning template that's the same as the other person's planning template in the rough form that you share with me. Your goals are all different. None of them are wrong. None of them are wrong. All of them are right because you are coming from how you perceive the problem. So the building block is information gathering and problem finding. We often skip over this as leaders because we think we've been around a long time and we know what we need to know. Now, obviously, there's truth to that, but that's a dangerous mindset to practice because then what you'll do is you'll ignore your attention won't be your energy won't be where your attention is, or the other way around. Okay. And there's type 2 future, and I call that two-dimensional. That's if then. So if I punch you in the nose, your nose bleeds. If then. All right. Then that's what we do to a large extent. If I don't wear a hat today, my hair will get wet. Okay. That's why Grandpa wears hats everywhere he goes, pretty much. If I don't wear a hat, I'll get a suntan I don't need on top of that. And so it's if-thens. Our life is really constituted with that level of if-thening. I think last video I spoke about thinking fast and thinking slow. And thinking fast, we said the author, Daniel Kahneman, mentioned that people don't like to think slow. I think I used the phrase, it makes their hair hurt. You got to really sit down and read the data and come to the right conclusions and reflect. And it's time consuming, and and often it's hard, and sometimes we don't have the skills to do that. If-thens are easy. Well, if I punch you in the nose, then you'll punch me in the nose. That's a possible future, maybe even a probable. So you go from type 1, which is get the data, to type 2, which is begin to break it out into if-then futures. Then you go to the heavy-duty one, that would be three-dimensional. Three-dimensional futuring is what we call, obviously, deeper, different additional dimension, a different perspective. That when you come together, you see the whole picture with the W. And that's when you can begin to realize what the probable futures might in fact be. Keep that in mind because even though we're not going to get to in this course, you'd like to know more about that as a leader. I promise you that. Okay. And that goes back to the futuring premises. I will show you this, and I think I'll stop here. And that would be an organization that doesn't future. Now you got to ask yourself now, how formally and informally are your colleagues, your leader, you as leader? How well is futuring embedded in their culture and practices, in their organizational practices? And this one, I will read it to you. An organization with and without futuring, when it does have futuring in place, systems thinking cross impacts are recognized. Example I often use is, quite a few years ago, that most kindergartens were only half day. State, I want to say maybe 20 years ago now, the state gave a lot of money to a lot of districts, and almost all of them went to full day K. Now, what's the impact of that? What is the impact? One impact was, well, we have to revise all of our curricula. The babies are more exposed to more things in a longer part of the day, whether it's a good idea or not. It means everything else ripples out across. That's a systems thinking premise. When you have futuring in place, then you have what we call creative problem solving in place, where you can really look for some, using the same word again, creative, game breaking ideas, things you never thought of before. What happens to collaborative leadership practices? Well, now stakeholders are empowered to talk to each other, and you're empowered to listen to each other, come up with new solutions to ideas that are necessary to be examined. And probably more important than anything else, is the organization's cultural capacity to change now can lead from the emerging / probable future and align it with what you want your preferable future to be. Now, your preferable futures, if I can be so bold, is to make sure all ENL children get what they need to be learners and to succeed in the new country. It's a noble, deep purpose. Actually, we can make it even deeper than that if you think about it. We'll go with that for the moment. That's your preferable future. Question: does the probable future you see today, today's the 27th, 23, and 10 years from now, 2033, how confident are you that the preferable future and the probable future will be together? And if they're not, what are you supposed to do about that as leader? That's an important premise to consider in terms of understanding the need for the kinds of changes that futuring will enable you to take part in. Now, take the converse. If it's without futuring in places, vague shared decision-making, vague vision, which many of you have and don't necessarily realize. Not you, but the buildings and districts that you're in. You can't shed old habits. You can't create. It's not in a vocabulary. It's not allowed. And you really can't collaborate because you're too busy acting against each other to serve your own individual or clique, CLIQUE. I'm never sure if I pronounced that correctly. So whole with the W, to come back to the vision, is can't glue it all together. And most simply, you're going to be forced to react rather than proact. I may have said this before, but it's worth saying again. My view of the COVID crisis is the impact on education is an indictment of the lack of futuring that schools have invested into creating a culture and creating a capacity to meet any crisis. No one could have said in March of 2019, I guess it was 20, COVID would close schools down. That's not what futuring does. But futuring could have said, or futurists could have said, well, there's lots of reasons for schools to close down. Calamities, mostly the God forbids, invasion, the aliens land. I'm not being a wise guy by saying that. And to what extent will the school be ready to deal with that? I was doing I don't know if I said this to you before, I was doing a presentation on Zoom about futuring to teachers and administrators from Ecuador who spoke better English than I do. I think I said this already. And one of the principals said to me that soldiers are shooting people in the streets in the capital city as we were speaking that day. I said, well, that's terrible. And we started talking about that a little bit. And he said, Yeah, but the kids are coming to school. Kids are coming to school because, however, the way they figured that, they were prepared to have children come to school in spite of the stripe in the streets. We got to think about that. We closed with 3 inches of snow. I could go on. He smiled in lots of ways with this. I'm stopping here. You go a little deeper into the presentation, you'll see some great tools to forecast the future. Maybe if I get ambitious, I'll do another video on this, but it's all there. And if you have questions about it, yeah, you can certainly give me a call, and I'll be glad to. I can talk about this all day long, as you may think. So now, watch my hands. We're talking about no water. We're talking about Fullen. We're talking about Cosa. We're talking about Bernardo. We're talking about Lewin. Did I say Lewin already? I'm not sure if I did. Dufour, Mackerel, and I probably left a few out. In terms of change theories, they overlap, they twist together. None of them are so discrete as they would have you think, including mine. But put them all together, and they spell a toolkit for you to change people whom you are going to lead or do lead. That's the challenge of future. And that's the question in this last discussion question is basically, show me how you see how these all come together. Again, one more time, I'm available to you if you need some help. But in any event, I appreciate your patience. I think I dropped the ball on some technology things here and there. And that's on me. But in the end, I'm pretty confident that we actually hit all the objectives for the course, and that you have this big muscle right over here that's about how to create a strategic plan, how to plan properly. Not properly, but in a way that you just learned and have practiced a little bit. I'm not saying you mastered it, but you certainly have practiced it. And my guarantee that if you lined up 10 administrators in your building or any place else, 8 of them wouldn't know what you're talking about because they never have had this experience of really learning how to strategically plan. In our case, futures-based plan. And with that, I thank you. Please keep in touch. I'd be happy to talk to any of you anytime about any professional issue you may want to get some advice about, because I'm old. I know a lot of things. And with that, I really wish you well. Okay, I love that you're in Project Leader. I think Project Leader is a great program. I'm very positive about it, and you can do some good things. I just thought of something as I'm exiting from you is the STEM issue is all about futuring. That's a plus. And the government and schools of education have realized that we needed to not only have emphasize the STEM issues much more than we had been doing, but also to assure ourselves that we bring in that we extend the same kind of equitable opportunity to diverse populations, and more specifically to females. I have a 12-year-old granddaughter who was keep telling me since he was less than a year old. I said the kid's going to be the president. Who was a pretty smart kid, and she's all over the STEM thing. She loves the STEM thing. She got insulted the other day when I said something about, I'm not sure how much math she knew. She got really insulted about that because A, she likes to learn anything she can learn, and B, because the school system, as far as I can tell, takes pains to bring every child along the math mastery premise, as well as the science piece too, for that matter. See all the things coming together? It's kind of neat when you see that. Hope I see you again.